Yeah.
All right, let's get going. We got work to do. I've given you, everyone got your Festivus joy?
Yes.
It's a Festivus miracle, people. All right, let's do this first. Movie. Enter a movie due the day you get back from break next year. Aha. But there's a choice of movies from this era, and there are a few that are rated R. I have no idea why. Some of them low rated has 4 asterisks. I have no idea why I did that, but just go with it. And they're rated R. Doesn't matter if you're 17 or not. This is school, so you have to get approval. And no, if it's in the movie's fine. That's what I need. And then you can watch them, and then follow directions. A short essay, about over a page. Over a page. And then a little bit over, that's fine. Basically, just like go over a page. And summary, historical accuracy, try to do a little bit in digging, and then what you learned from them, what you didn't know. And I like all of these movies. I told you yesterday, Glory, or 2 days. Yesterday, 2 days, Glory is a fantastic movie. I really like Glory. Amistad is amazing. Pretty rough. 12 Years a Slave, about a man who was kidnapped and then enslaved in Louisiana, the 1840s. It tells the story. It is wow. It's rough. It's brutal. It shows supposedly what slavery was really like. It's a fantastic movie, but it's really it's rated R. Probably yes. Wow. But they're all good. Fort Apache movies, the last few, or the American West. Fort Apache is one of the classic movies. Kind of a fictionalized version of the Battle of Little Big Horn. Like Andersonville, about the most infamous Confederate prison for POWs during the war. Good movies. And you pick one. You have to figure out where to get it, but you're very talented. You can figure it out. All right. So let's look at the other one. That is from either chapter 16, well, it's mostly from chapter 16, but you get most of the stuff from chapter 15 in the review book, but you need chapter 16 to get it all. And you see the parts, the ones that are highlighted? Everyone see the little highlights on there? You get back on Monday, well, quiz over those. Just a little matching quiz. Then I'll answer any questions you have about the rest, and that will be due on Tuesday. All right? Sound good? But the ones that are highlighted are going to be the easiest ones to find. I'm sure you wouldn't have any trouble with them. Do the quiz, and then finish the rest of this. All right? Got to do it. And just want to be clear, it would be easier for me if I didn't have to give Christmas assignment, just to be easier for you. But the clock is ticking. We have to be done with everything by May 8th. That's when the AP exam is. You have to be done with everything by up to before 1980. So it's a lot of stuff. All right, so take your notes up. And did you guys know we had a little windstorm yesterday? Yeah. Anyone lose any trees or anything? You have any power? Do you? Yeah. You got power back?
I know Target like all those sorts of power, and Memorial Park, 6 of the big pine trees fell.
I heard my friend.
In the corner.
Yeah, we had some issues.
Stand winds of 70 miles per hour.
They're only over 70.
Big city center fell across.
I saw
So we got a tour by
Well, one would win. I didn't think it was interesting that I know why they canceled school, but I did thought about sitting on the first players out in the wind. All right, you're in the safe building. Let's go out to the wind. Was it 3? I didn't know that. I heard it was just 1. And then walk through a lot.
Yeah, and like kids weren't allowed to get off the bus if their parents were there to pick them up, so then bring them back.
Which was, parents are working. There's not no such thing. All right. What's the name for it? The Army's on the defensive always have an advantage because you have shorter lines and longer supply lines. And the whole thing came from basically one day. The South had to make it look like they're still holding out. The North had to make it look like they're going to win. for what big event in 1864? Yeah, the election. And who did Lincoln put in overall command? At Grant. And, oh, for the Gettysburg Address, Lincoln was reclaiming what document for the United States? Yes, and put his version of what the founding fathers wanted. It's brilliant, brilliant document. All right, let's get to this. Do we get to Spotsylvania? Did I tell you what happened at anything in Spotsylvania? Give you an idea how bloody this battle is going to be. The first Union Corps to arrive. Oh, did I mention that the Confederates beat them by 3 hours and immediately dug trenches? And pretty soon they had time to build very elaborate trenches where they dug about 4 feet deep, piled the dirt in front, and then put wood, chopped down trees and put wood. So it was a really formidable defensive. So they put the rifle right over breastworks right here. And just a great defensive. They learned real fast. Even though it's miserably French. So when General Sedgwick arrived with his staff, there were a few Confederate snipers taking pot shots at him at 500 yards. Now this is still black powder, which doesn't push the bullet very far. It's not even an explosive, which is nice. It's gases. If you're going to use a black powder musket, how do you have to aim your rifle for shooting 500 yards? Do you know? Yeah, you're almost like shooting a mortar, kind of lobbing the shells. So the point is, they're not very accurate. Bullets are hitting the dirt around Sedgwick's staff, and they're ducking and hiding, even though the bullets, I mean, they're just random chance. And Sedgwick, who was loved by his men, they called him Uncle John, and brave, just absolutely courageous and led by example. And he was infuriated, letting the men see my staff hide from bullets from 500 yards. It's appalling. So he rode up, looking at his men, not ducking at all. And he said, "Men, there's nothing to be afraid of. They couldn't hit an elephant." This. Right there. That would be a precursor to what's going to happen in Spotsylvania. That's Sedgwick right there. So, Union forces tried probing attacks. Meade ordered various attacks. Grant's trying to figure out where they want to take this road junction. The Confederate line went on for about 11 miles and is now part of the national park. You can go along these trench lines. They've promoted it a little bit, but you can see where it is. And in front of the lines, in most places, there was a clearing of anywhere from 50 to 100 yards where any attacking force has to come out in the open. I think we know the problem with that. Well, they tried a couple attacks here, just trying to find an opening. And right here, an officer named Emory Upton came up with a plan. And here's my quick little drawing of it. I got to redo it. Upton, it's just so kind of an amazing idea. His plan was this. All right. So here's the Confederate line. Do you feel like you're in Virginia now? Pretty good, huh? Upton was a regimental commander. And to give you an idea how many men are killed or get sick, to no longer fight, the regiment normally should have 1,000 men. He had less than 400. And he started out the campaign 600. And so that just gives you an idea how many men are going to be killed in a second. Instead of lining up in parallel lines and marching towards them, men just got slaughtered at Gettysburg, at Fredericksburg, etc. He came up with this idea. Sneak up in the woods in front of that clearing. So you're hiding in front of the clearing, but line up in 2 columns of almost 200 men each. And then no preliminary bombardment, nothing. Quick bugle call, have everyone stand up and fix bayonets, don't stop and fire, get up, scream like maniacs, and sprint the 50 yards to the trench line. Take the Confederates by surprise, and then turn both directions, clear up the trench line, and let reinforcements come. These are still muzzle loads. Best case scenario, you could load, it takes you 20 seconds to load. 20 to 30 seconds is normal to load. So how many times can they fire that a guy's charging 50 yards sprinting? How fast can you run 50 yards? I could do it in about 2 seconds. How about you? That sounds about right, right? Seriously. With gear, holding a rifle, 7, 8 seconds. 8 seconds, 9, if you're in a line. Less than 10 seconds. So, you know, that's legit. How many times can they fire you? I'm shocked. And it's a pretty good idea. So first thing they opted out to do is find 2 volunteers to do one. Yeah, the lead. There's has to be some maniac, because every gun's gonna be fired at them. And guess what? There's always 2 maniacs. There's always maniacs. Any of you ready to go? I'll do it, yeah. And then they snuck up. You know, 1 o'clock on the 10th. The whistles, or they said we shut off that. Quick bugle charge, they got up and charged. And it took the Confederates completely by surprise. They hardly got a shot off. The first guys in line weren't hit at all. They got to the Confederate line and cleared out about 50 yards of the Confederate trenches like that. Confederates were running, looked like it worked. The problem was no one thought it would work, so there's nobody ready to exploit that breakthrough. So the Confederates could rally and push them back. There was fighting all along the line, but they just weren't ready. But now, Upton's come up with something. And then the next day, now General Upton, he was promoted, would be given a brigade of over 800 men. And this one, he would do this. Have just about 200 men in 4 columns, sneak right here, where they thought would be a vulnerable spot, the Confederate line, which makes this angle. But it's 100 yards. So they got to go across a big field, and you can stand exactly where his men were and look across like 100 yards is starting to get pretty long when you're carrying weapons and people are firing them. And the plan was similar. Charge, clear it out, and then have these 2 lines just break through and go. Recap it behind the Confederate lines, keep the scare on, keep them running, and then exploit it. Over 12,000 men under General Hancock. Remember, he was the victor of at Gettysburg of Pickett's charge. He would exploit that breakthrough and attack right there. Right after they broke through. So it's a good plan. Meade had a good plan. Grant was all behind it. So it's going to be.
Yeah, Bruin of the Month recipients in here. Yeah. Well, the rubber all. Sadie Styron.
Yeah. Sadie, when thinking of an outstanding student, Sadie Steyer comes to mind. She lives by the Capitol Code. She comes to school every day with a positive, can-do attitude. She will volunteer to help out and go the extra mile without even being asked. She takes pride in her work she does. She is kind and respectful to others. So nominated by your teachers, voted on by your teachers. So congratulations.
Who you want to thank? Besides me, opponents.
Her study teacher last year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
All right. Where we at? Oh, it worked perfectly. They stood up, they charged, the Confederates were taken by surprise. No one of the first 10 men in each column, none of them were hit. The Confederates, just so surprised. They broke through. Confederate forces are running, they're breaking through. It looked like it's going to work perfectly. The only problem was this. Hancock's men, which had to pull out here and come here, got lost back. Interior lines. They got lost. They could hear shooting, but every time they kind of turn a corner, they're in another little gully. And you can go back and look at it, you kind of get an idea. And the mountains kind of sounds kind of ricochet around. So they couldn't really, they kept going the wrong direction towards the sound. And so they were an hour late. And by that time, Confederates pushed them back to the trench. And then for the next 20 hours, they fought along that line, which would be known as, that's a picture of it right there. You see the Confederate line. That's a picture at Spotsylvania, the Bloody Angle. And back and forth, they fought over this trench line with the wood. There's kind of that mound of dirt. 20 hours. Men went back and forth. There was a Union charge pushed back by the Confederates. Bodies were heaped up and piled in this really small little area. And then it started to rain, and rain hard. And they kept reinforcements coming all evening and all night. They fought the torrential rain. And the stories are of men, especially at night, they would have torches so they could see a little bit. And men would be able to kind of duck behind that mound between the trenches, near the trench line. And they would be handing up muskets, and guys in front would kind of pull and fire to the face just across, face of their head. They'd splash with the bayonet to pull the musket back and drop them. Wounded men would fall right there. Men would push over them and stand over them. Hundreds of men would drown in the mud because they were wounded and couldn't get away. Bodies were heaped up. This went on for hour after hour. Bloody Angle would be one of the hardest fought battles of the war. And there was a 22-inch oak tree. If you know anything about oak, that's hard wood. And it was cut in half, not by cannon. And this is still black powder, but by bullets. So that's the spot. They cut the tree and it's in the Smithsonian. So here's my picture of the tree. I made a little picture. I need a new little one of these. But I'll pass it around. And if you look, you see little gray specks in it. Gonna make it out there. Those are musket balls. So these are bullets. Cut a tree in half. Now, you can do that to a 22-inch oak tree. It's going to happen to human bodies. It's just going to be mild. I mean, I'm not making this up. Mounds of flesh. Just mounds of flesh and bodies mixed together. At the end of 20 hours, the Confederates pulled back and redug their trenches, and the Union was left with this little bit of trench line. In one 300-foot section of that trench where the fighting was, there were 500 miles. Just on top of each other. The men in the mud, bodies mixed, pieces mixed together. It was a slaughter. They had no idea who these people were. They couldn't identify them. There's nothing left. That is why, if you go to these Civil War battlefields, this is only just the beginning. There'll be row after row. In one tomb in Arlington, which I'll get to, there's a tomb here with 11,000 remains by the remains of 11,000 men gone. Just imagine what World War I experienced. You go to the cemeteries of World War I, World War II too, but World War I, it's because they're closer together, so you can see more. Just grave after grave. We know they're dead, but we don't know how. So both sides just basically stared at each other. At the end of that battle, there would be another over 31,000 casualties, most Union. Now, once again, we don't need to know the numbers, but this is only a week of fighting. Over 65,000 casualties in a week. Remember the 7 days there was just a Paul dot for 7 days, and that was half as many casualties. It's getting so awful. So just watch right here. They're here, remember interior lines? The race was on for the next road junction. The Confederates won, so Grant ordered me to go to the next junction. The race was on to here. At a place called Cold Harbor, Lee's men beat Grant's men by an hour, but they knew how to dig trenches and dug elaborate trenches along a road, and there's wooden fence they reinforced with great defensive line, and there's another one of those places with a mile of clearing in front. Right here. But you notice they're closer to Richmond. Grant looks at the numbers and figures they've got to be running out of men. They got reinforced, and so they ordered another attack. June 1st, 1864, the Battle of Cold Harbor. And it was a mile. They couldn't do Ferraro's strategy. And so they're going to line up again in the straight lines, as you can see in this picture, and march over a mile of clearing. And the plan was to go and they would attack. A mile of clearing. And the men who had been in Spotsylvania or they knew about Gettysburg over there or Fredericksburg, many looked at that. But they thought one could sort of push and they could finally break through that day. So Grant ordered me to do it. Me thought it would work. And so many of the men were sitting, they know what happens possibly. And the reinforcements, of course, are all told about the bodies. So men start taking little pieces of paper. First, they have little pieces of paper. They wrote down the name, their unit, hometown, who to contact, into the back of the paper. Maybe there was something so different. Now, some men were making little metal, well, little name tags. They were building, but that wasn't the general issue. And they started doing that in World War One. The Germans were the first one to make that mandatory because of the body. And so they started wearing these metal tags. In World War II, the United States started giving them names. They became mandatory. Anybody know what they're called? So it happened. So when they attacked at noon, I'm sorry, this was at 1 o'clock. Same thing, we talked about this before. It's like a terrible repeat. Artillery opened up at about 500 yards. Then canister, then muskets. Men were cut down in lines, just lines on top of each other. Few of the units got close to the Confederate lines, but never close to 20 yards. But one of Meade's staff said, he told Meade, we broke in their trenches. He wanted to be given credit for saying that. And so Meade ordered more men. In 20 minutes, first 20 minutes of this battle, 7,000 Union soldiers were killed. 20 minutes. This is pretty high explosives. There's not machine guns. There's not the modern weapons of today. 7,000 in 20 minutes. A bloodbath. But more men were sent in. By the end of the day, another almost 13,000 Union casualties. And just a couple thousand. Another disaster. 2 days later, when they started hearing bodies. Remember, these are diary documents. Back then, people wrote in documents. They wrote down and reported. So it's a loss. It's lost. No one really does that anymore. I don't. It's just lost. But I really good for trips. But one of the documents they found in the tail of a Union soldier. The last entry was first, 1864. Today I died. Today I died. He wrote it before the attack in Poland. So, I'm not, think about being men to go, or being killed, can't fuck. These are thousands a day. The Union forces have had over 60,000 casualties, counting everything. Veterans have had 40,000. And they're running out of men. Now, Grant was hoping they could, still one of these battles, win a big victory, a big tactical victory on the battlefield and win the war. That's not happening. That almost never happens. Does anyone know the name for when you kill so many of the enemy? Here they are, right here, from here to here, 60,000 casualties. You kill so many of the enemy, they can no longer fight. It's a word you have to know. It's called attrition. In fact, they use terms that bleed them white. You kill so many of the enemy, they can't fight. So it's not like winning a big victory of showing you what a great general you are. It's the fact they've suffered so much they can't go. How many men can you kill? How many people can you make suffer? How many people back home can you make miserable, distraught, heartbroken that they have to call? How many men can you take? Wars are political. And that's the way all wars are fought. Remember I kept telling you that they kept thinking there'd be one big battle? That never happens. And the number of times that's really happened in major wars, you can count on the history of human life. It's attrition. And Grant is reluctantly accepting the fact that attrition. Problem with attrition is this. Right this time. It's slow. It's slow. But that's also part of the reason why wars get so awful. Every major war in American history has been won or lost by attrition. World War I and World War II, Germans ran out of men. Japanese ran out of everything. Ran out. Wars the United States has lost. We had so many men killed, so much suffering, we said it wasn't. Vietnam, Afghanistan. It's too much. It's not. But this is a candid photo. This is one of these pictures that really wasn't taken at this time. These are pews from a church. So this is right after the Battle of Cold Harbor. And they drug the pews out of the church for Grant and Meade's staff to meet. These are all their staff men. And this is Grant. And he's leaning over, it's hard to see, but there's a guy in front of him. That's Meade with a map. And they're planning something. It could be this next plan. Grant had one more idea that might hasten the attrition. There's Cold Harbor. They can attack here, Lee will come down deep trenches like it has happened. But actually, send the majority of his men over the James River and attack the vital railway junction of Petersburg, thus depriving Richmond of its main supply line. It's a good plan. The Confederates know about this plan, and they've had enslaved people dig massive trenches here. But it's a good plan. Thus, Petersburg. And it almost worked. It started out exactly the way they thought. Lee dug trenches, they did a fake attack. They sent foreigner general by the name of Baldy Smith. You can probably guess why it's called Baldy Smith. They dug, or this is the pontoon bridge over the James, half-mile long. James is a really big river. And one more thing about the pontoon bridge. That's a really cool picture. And yes, still use pontoon bridges today. You notice we put dirt over the wood? You notice the dirt here? It's over the wood connecting the pontoons. Horses won't go over it. They can see water in between the slats of wood. So you put dirt and that hay over it so they'll cross. So the next time you're building a pontoon bridge, 20 points extra credit for pontoon bridge. 30 points. Of the elevator bridge. So it almost worked. But when Smith's Corps arrived, they saw these very elaborate defensive lines and palisades, very elaborate. And mile after mile of these weapons the French designed. Now, you don't need to know them, but I kept forgetting the name, so I typed it in. Cheval de Frise. This is pre-barbed wire. So they would make these, see these, they would use these pikes and tap and bore them into logs, and then put a bunch of them here, a bunch of them here, etc. Because I don't know if you know this, but people don't like to be impaled on spikes. Did you know that? And horses don't either. So that's how they would do it. You put a bunch right here. Get my image of this? A bunch right here. Leave this spot empty. Put a bunch here. So any attacking force will come here. They'll see the cheval de frise, and they don't want to get impaled. So they all go to the open spot. And what do you have waiting for them? You have your cannon and everything in that spot. It just okay. 50 years later, they invent barbed wire. That's what barbed wire, like World War I. That's what barbed wire. They lay out a bunch, forcing the funnel the attack. I need water. And so okay. I don't think it'll blow up. You're probably okay. No, I just saw a light and it was like. So. When Smith saw these defensive lines, he was at Cold Harbor. He knew about Spotsylvania. And he hesitated to be honest. He refused to attack. There were less than 5,000 Confederates in battle line. Most of them wounded men. They put him behind the line because they couldn't fight to break the combat. He could have overwhelmed them immediately. In those 3 hours, Meade got there, furious, ordered an attack immediately. And what had happened in those 3 hours? These forces arrived. So, another. So, the siege of Petersburg would begin. Both armies now exhausted after horrific casualties. They dug trenches. Confederates extended their trenches. Union forces dug trenches. The line in between them then would be anywhere from a mile in some spots to less than 30 yards in some spots. Soon, there'd be snipers everywhere picking off anybody who just stuck their head above the trenches. So the trenches would soon be 9-10 feet deep. You can walk in the trenches, but it's just gonna be miserable. Both sides would do attacks, but there'd be horrific casualties. They'd send out scouting parties at night. But if you were caught in between the trenches, when the sun came up, you'd have to basically hide all day. Because if you were caught and tried to get up and rush to the line, you're dead. There's no way. Just as you stick your head above the trenches. They would soon get a name at Petersburg for the area between the trenches. Anybody know what they would call it? Yeah, heard no man's land? Yeah. I think of you, I bet a lot of you do too, think of World War I. But it's Petersburg too. So here's a picture of the little cannon, the Palisades firing. The trenches soon will go all the way from Richmond down to Petersburg. The Union forces couldn't quite get to the last major rail link. Here, you can imagine Virginia in the summer, hot, trying to protect itself from the sun, miserable life in the trenches. If it rained, you're going to be stuck in mud and it'll fill up and you can never dry off. Something called trench foot, what I'll tell you about more later. And think about where the bathroom is. Maybe just kind of dig a little area in the side of the trench. So every time it rained, it would flood. And not only that, there's bodies, dead horses, dead people. Just a nightmare. So think about hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of misery and boredom. Where they would try anything to look at the clouds because you can't stick your head up. Then mixed in with a minute or two of absolute terror. And that's what it was like. So here's showing soldiers trying to weigh the time away. This was done in Harper's Magazine. Gambling, anything, playing games. But here's one of the most popular trench games. This would happen in World War I, would happen in World War II. It's happened in Ukraine. They would get a rifle with a bayonet and stick a hat on it. And they would stick it above the trench line, and then they would bet how many musket balls would be through the hat in, let's say, 30 seconds. And that would be their game. Making fun of the snipers out ready to kill them. By the way, soldiers hate snipers. I think you can understand why. So, a plan came back. A regiment in Burnside, yes, Ambrose Burnside is back. His corps, they were hard rock miners. And they came up with a strategy that's as old as war to go under fortifications. If we can't go over, let's go under and dig a tunnel. They tried it at Vicksburg. Let's dig a tunnel. So there's a spot in the lines that was about 50 to 60 yards apart between the Union works and the Confederate works. This is a little bit inaccurate here. The actual tunnel is going to be about 150 yards. And their plan was to dig a small tunnel through the clay soil. It's got to be deep because the Confederates know they buy tunnels, so they're listening. And you can collapse tunnels pretty easily. And it'd be about 4.5 feet high. Look about right? 3 feet wide. And they would dig the tunnel. And they have to figure out a way using geometry to get right under the Confederate works. And they figure out a way to pump air in. They also had to take out the dirt at night because there were spies everywhere who was looking for things like this. And they suggested it, went to Burnside. Burnside said, why not? Send it to me, it means I do it. And now they're behind it. And the plan is to blow a hole in the Confederate line with blacktop. So what they would do is dig underneath and then go about 45 feet in each direction under the Confederate lines. And then they're going to, so here they are, please be the right one. They're sneaking the dirt out at night. Here they are, they're going to roll over 300 barrels. They call them kegs of dynamite. And that, I said dynamite, black powder, it's still pre-dynamite. So black powder is not an explosive, but still. 300 kegs is a lot. And stack them both ways. Light a fuse, and the plan is this. The explosion would happen. Now, they're 50 feet below the Confederate line, so what they thought was this. It might collapse the Confederate line, but the shock waves would concuss it and then attack it. It's a good plan. It's a really good plan. So, they go through the process of it. They have a division all ready to go. Every morning at sunup, Union guns would shell the Confederate lines to make their life miserable. But right at sunup, what will Confederates do? They go into the bomb proofs. and waited out. About 5-10 minutes of shelling. And then both sides would come out and be like an informal breakfast truce. They put the campfires and make their breakfast in the trenches. Never got that image? So when do you blow up the mine? When they're cooking breakfast. Yeah. And then they got a regiment, or division, I'm sorry, soldiers who were determined to fight. The Army of the Potomac did not allow what they called colored regiments to fight first. Other theaters did, but not there. This would be the first one to fight in combat. Under a commander by the name, I wrote it up here from last period, Ferraro. He was an abolitionist, last music teacher from New York. And these are all volunteers. And their plan was, wall out in no man's land in the middle of the night, lay in no man's land, not move. Preliminary bombardment, boom, muffled explosion, then attack them that way. Everyone get that image? And then other reinforcements. It's a good plan. At the last minute, Meade ordered a different division. I mean, literally that night before. It's July 17th. And people still say to this day, because this is a famous battle, still say to this day that Meade and Grant ordered that division out because black and they're racist. They thought they wouldn't fight. And that is 100% not true. The Confederates have been spreading a myth that they have been purposely recruiting black soldiers so the United States could kill all black men in battle. So the United States would be a white republic. That was a myth going around. And we didn't want to be accused of that if it was a slaughter of white people. Hold them out. A new division under a general by the name of Leadley, who had been at Cold Harbor and Spotsylvania. They were half as big. They took so many casualties. Were told as the sun went down, you're going to crawl out in no man's land, and you're going to attack at sun. And they didn't tell them about the month. They didn't tell them anything about it. They just said you're going to attack, and the assumption was you're dead. So as the 2,000, a little bit over 2,000 men crawled out, Leadley didn't go with them. You want to guess what Leadley did? He went to a bar booth and proceeded to drink as much whiskey as he could put in his body. So he's drunk out of his mind by the summer. Out of his mind, drunk. And his men are crawled out. Yes, he will be court-martialed. He crawled out. So, preliminary bombardment. Those men are waiting there, assuming we're dead. Then campfire started with the Browns. They had a black powder fuse. They had electric fuses, but they didn't trust it. And so they had a 150-yard black powder fuse. You ever seen like we fire gun? A really long one. On the base of the top. And they lit it and everyone kind of pulled back. There's oh, I have the picture. Here's what the opening of the top. That's all that's left. It's like this. And you get a little bit lower as you go. That's all that's left. So they lit the fuse. And about 80 yards, and you know what's going to happen. What happened? So they had to find a crazy, very fast volunteer. He's also pretty short. He light the fuse and run. They found a corporal and the Johnson. He went out, lit it, and took off running as fast as he could go. Now they expected a muffled explosion and a shockwave, right? He got literally out of that plant. It's literally just coming out. It exploded. It wasn't a muffled explosion. It was a massive boom. The entire Confederate line blew up. All of it. About 70 yards of line just went flying up in air. In fact, he was shot out nearly 100 yards by the shockwave. But he's fine. Followed by a jet of fire outside of that. That must have been something to see. Supposedly, he just kind of skidded and popped up. The line was gone. Everything just flying up in the air. And men around it had no idea this was coming. Just things were falling on them. At one spot in the Confederate line, there was a little group of soldiers right underneath the mine. You know, they had no idea. Right over the mine, they had no idea. They're cooking their breakfast, and they had slaves cooking their breakfast. Boom, they're gone. A quarter mile away behind the Union line, so more on the open, was a Union squad doing the same thing. And also an explosion, things were falling. They had no idea this stuff. It's pretty big chunks of all kinds of stuff is coming down. All of a sudden, they see something pretty big coming. They're kind of watching it, bigger, bigger, bigger. And it was the man who was cooking their breakfast. He was coming down feet first, and according to the story, he just kind of landed on his feet in front of them. And did this. They looked at him and they're like, whoa! They actually took him to a tent and they charged a dime to come see the flying. As I understand, they split the money, but that's their story. I like the story. These men, most of them have not done, silly, got up and they just started stumbling towards the explosion. Remember, their commander is drunk back in the bomb proof. And it was a massive crater. Thus, the battle of the crater. It went down nearly 30, 40 feet deep, in one spot 50 feet deep. The edges are sheer because it all exploded out. They went to it. Now, what they should have done is gone around it, right? But what did they do? They went. Followed by Ferraro's division. Ferraro's division would be reinforcements. They went to the edge of the tunnel and they all are the crater and they went into it. Where was Ferraro? He wasn't there either. He was back in the same bomb group as Leland. You remember the name of people who wanted to limit drinking? Things with a T. Temperance. Ferraro was the leader of the temperance movement. He was trying to convince Wheatley of the evils of drink. That would have been a conversation once. But they all came in and they had a golden opportunity. This almost worked. It really almost worked. You imagine what's going to happen. The Confederates began to recover. When Union forces got to the other side of the crater, it's sheer and men were trying to crawl out, they couldn't get out. And soon there were 6,000 men in this crater. Shoulder to shoulder. Thousands. All the Confederates had to do was just stand at the edge. They soon tipped up cannons and started shooting cannons. A golden opportunity turned into another 4,000 casualties. The Battle of the Crater will be one of those, another one of those battles, another one of many of what ifs. This is what the crater would look like after the battle. And it's a little bit more shallow because they just shoveled dirt over the bodies. See it standing in it? It's still there. They used to let tourists go into the crater, but it started to erode away, so now they don't let you, which I think is very appropriate. But then it devolved into stalemate. And the stalemate is going to last month after month. Remember, they had to show they're winning the war by the election. We're going into August. Everybody down by August of 1864, stalemate, and the election is coming. Now, the battles in the West are a lot easier to cover. And I'm really fascinated by this because of how close they came. If Lincoln does not win, it's over. Sherman in the West, though. We're going to very quickly do Sherman in the West. General Sherman, remember, had to defeat Atlanta. Defending Confederate forces, and this map did not work very well. I thought it was better. One of the best Confederate commanders who's wounded and replaced by Lee. He's finally back, relatively healthy, even though he would die of his 1862 wound in 1889. Joseph E. Johnston, a brilliant defensive commander, perfect for what the Confederates need. Sherman had over 90,000 men. Johnston had about 50,000 men. But Sherman has to attack. And Sherman's here. Johnston is here along the railway line. Supply. And what Sherman did is this 5 different times. Showed Sherman could do it, and it's an option B did not have. They faked an attack here, and using mountain valleys, tried to outflank. The only problem was that Johnston, very good general, realized it and would always pull back in time. Happened here, 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 and here. So, even though there would be battles, bloody, but nothing like these. Not even close to the number of people who have been killed. So Sherman pushed Johnston back. Relatively bloodless, considering. But this is what we have to get. By the end of July, Sherman is at the gates of Atlanta. Johnston's army is still there, and it was at stake. The two most important theaters for the history of the United States, stalemate, and just months from the election. And don't write this down. I just know the ones I don't forget. These are the Confederate defense. And they are so elaborate, even more elaborate than Petersburg. Stalemate. Oh, sure, Sherman could win, but it might take months. The election is coming. Speaking of the election, last thing for today, the election of 1864. And those are the two men running for office. That's right after the Battle of Antietam. And there's Abraham Lincoln trying to convince George McClellan to move. And those will be the two men running for office. So let me explain the Lincoln first. The Republicans realize, okay, we got to make it bigger than, we want to appear bigger than political parties. So they came up with a party for just one election, the Union Party. And the Union Party was Republicans and war Democrats. Democrats for the prosecution of the war. So everyone got this, the Union Party. It's only one election. It's only one election. And what it was is we have a Republican president and then a Democrat as the vice president to show for union. So Lincoln was a Republican. Johnson was a Democrat, but they called themselves Union as a campaign form. Johnson was not only a war Democrat wanting to win the war, he was from Tennessee. He was a Southerner who stayed loyal to the Union, and he hated the big plantation. He was born dirt poor, maybe the poorest of all American presidents. Like maybe Andrew Jackson or Bill Clinton. And so, Union, Lincoln, and an angry toad. So, and they disagree on everything. Johnson and Lincoln would disagree on everything. But remember, vice presidents don't do much, right? So, the Democrats nominated George McClellan. And McClellan pledged, I'm going to win the war. But everybody knew a vote for McClellan was a vote to end it. A vote for McClellan was a vote to end it. So, it's a referendum on the war. You vote Republicans and Union Party, we're going to win it. We're going to finish. Democrats, we're going to end the war. And both sides tried to portray themselves as the country or the side that would best prepared to win. Here's a Union one. Here's a Lincoln poster that's supposed to represent working man, paper hat. And it's Lincoln and a working man shaking hands. And what kind of country are they going to bring with union and liberty? What's this building back here? And who's going to this school? What kind of kids? Do you see it? It's integrated. What a changing country in just 4 years. They are now bragging that we're going to bring equality. What a country. And yes, it would all fall apart, I'm sorry, 14 years later. Union and liberty, the slave auction's back, and that's McClellan shaking hands with Jefferson Davis. But here's the issue. Last thing you have to write down. By August, the stalemate looked like a McClellan victory. Everybody thought McClellan. Here is a McClellan poster acting like he's going to bring Lincoln and Davis together, but everybody knew a McClellan victory meant the end of the war. Lincoln was so, I'll finish this poem. So we're going to look at that finished poem. Does everyone have the assignment? Is everyone happy about the assignment? Not that. Hey, gotta do it. Gotta do it. I'll make it up to you after the exam. I told you what we'll do after the exam, didn't I? Huh? No fitness. You guys will run, wall sits, you dig a trenches, maybe dig a moat. Say it again, where are we in the water? You figure it out. I'm not a hydraulic. Yeah. I am a pontoon bridge. Yeah. But you guys figure out the water. You guys have to figure out where you get the crocodiles. That's up to you. You got to have something to moat. That's nice, Sadie. I have no idea why I'm in the sixth period since they missed it. I think it's gonna be the very fast version of this.
Yeah. I have another gift,
Yay, who is it this time?
Johnston.